So that's a major difference than with Congress or the president. The president can't use his powers in Texas. Congress can't use their powers in Texas. But the Supreme Court can make a decision about what goes on in Texas. Why do you think they're different? What, Tammy?
They're smaller.
Okay, they're smaller. That could be it. I mean, but what is the major difference? How is the job of the Supreme Court different than the job of the president or the job of the legislature? They what? Check everything for what? You're on the right track. They're checking to see if something's constitutional. If they're the final word on the Constitution, remember we said in Article 6 that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So if they are telling us what the Constitution says, the Constitution kind of trumps everything. And so that's what they have a right to say. If what you're doing in Texas is a violation of the Constitution, you can't do that because we're the final word. Now, the thing is, though, you guys, they don't take up cases unless they have some kind of national application. And it kind of is working okay in Texas, and they don't need to get involved. They're not going to get involved. They only get involved if it's like a major violation of civil rights, civil liberties, or if it's something that has some kind of national application that like needs to be considered for the entire country. Okay? All right, so let me make sure that we covered all the vocab that I wanted us to cover. So we talked about original jurisdiction, right? Right? We have appellate jurisdiction, right? Trial court and appellate court. So I didn't say those, but would you know what that would mean? What would be the difference in a trial court and an appellate court, Peyton? Well, let's think about it, because I used the word appellate jurisdiction earlier. Okay. What's an appeal?
An appeal is when, like, you lose a court case and then you try to redo it basically.
Good. So they have appellate jurisdiction, right? The higher courts. So that means that they all are appellate courts. The ones with original jurisdiction would be trial courts because you're going to go to trial.
First, and then
yes. Yes. So these are not considered trials because a trial means that we're going to deliver a verdict. We're going to say guilt, innocence. We're going to settle a dispute between people. Okay? All right. The only other thing we need to talk about is specifically over here on this federal side. Okay? On this federal side, which of these courts was created by the Constitution?
The Supreme Court.
Yep, that was it, right? Okay. And how did the Constitution specify that one would become a Supreme Court justice?
Appointed by the Senate.
Appointed by the
President
and
approved by the Senate.
And confirmed by the Senate. Absolutely, that was it. So remember, we talked about this probably like the second day of class. I know it's been a while. We said that very early, Congress realized this wasn't going to do it, and we needed to have other courts. Does anybody remember what they did to create these lower courts? It was a case called Marbury versus Madison that we looked at, but they passed some kind of law.
This was in law too.
It's exactly like it's what it sounds like. It's the Judiciary Act of 1789. Okay? So very beginning, right? 1787 wrote a constitution. 1789, very beginning, we're like, whoop, we need more courts. So Congress used the Judiciary Act of 1789 to create these other courts. Okay? And there are more federal courts than that. Like they can create special ones. Back in the 80s, there was a ton of bankruptcy in this area, and they created a bankruptcy court. They can create special military courts. Like they can create any of that kind of stuff, but it's always Congress, right? All right, other major difference. Look over here on this side. How do these people that work for these courts, how do these judges get their jobs?
Do they run for that?
They are elected at the state level. And now this is particular to Texas, but most states are really similar. Some use like different kind of systems. In Texas, if you stay here, you will vote on your ballot in 2016 for Texas Supreme Court, Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, State Court of Appeals, county judges, and state district judges. The only one we don't elect city judges in Texas. They're hired by the city council. So they're basically like hired into their job, okay? Some states don't do it that way. Some states do a thing where they're like appointed and then elected. It's called like a Missouri plan. Ways of doing it.
Missouri does it.
Huh? Yes,
Does it.
yes, they do. I want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. When you think about decisions, if you are appointed and you serve for life versus being elected, that's going to affect some of the decisions that you make. So I want you guys to think about that a little bit. We'll come back to that later, okay? All right, I need everybody to take their paper and flip it over. I'm not sure if it's the very back or I think it's just the back of that page. Are there some questions there? Awesome. All right, I want you to take a little time on your own, and I want you to answer question 1. It says, with the hole punch in there, how do federalism and jurisdiction affect the influences that the courts might have on public policy? So think about those two words. How does the idea of federalism and jurisdiction, how does that affect the idea of a judge impacting public policy?